Nomination will be favorably reported to the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I have a request from Senator Graham to put in a list of oversight hearings he had when he was chairman of this committee the last 2 years.
Without objection. And now we turn to the bill on today's agenda, S-2992, the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. I want to thank Subcommittee Chair Klobuchar and Ranking Member Grassley for their leadership on this bill, of which I'm a co-sponsor. The bill sponsors have filed a manager's amendment. I'll speak briefly to the bill and then turn to the lead sponsors, Klobuchar and Grassley, to offer the manager's amendment. This legislation addresses the efforts by online platforms to use their market dominance to preference their own products over those of other businesses that use the platform, or to discriminate against other businesses in the enforcement of the platform's terms of service in a way that would materially harm competition. I won't go through all detail here, but I will say that the members of the subcommittee have had hearings and have compiled testimony from a lot of sources, public and private, before this bill reached the floor. I won't read all the details other than to say that I believe that this bill is a step in the right direction. I am particularly encouraged by a group that I respect, the Consumer Reports, which sent a letter this week saying that they applauded the bipartisan group of senators working together to address problematic market power of the largest online platforms. And let me at this point turn the floor over to the lead sponsor of the amendment, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin, for listing the American Innovation and Choice Online Act on the committee's agenda. Our Ranking Member Grassley has already given strong comments and has shown such strong leadership as the lead Republican on this bill, which we introduced, along with Senators Durbin, Graham, Blumenthal, Kennedy, Booker, Hawley, Hirono on this committee, as well as Senators Warner, Daines, and Lummis. I think one commentator referred to it as the Ocean's 11 of co-sponsors, with people having one thing in common, which I know is shared by many members of this committee, no matter where they come from, and that is that we've got to have fair competition in this country. What this is about is, at its core, monopolies, dominant platforms, American companies that have given us incredible innovations, employ many people that we are proud of. But at some point, when you have a situation where, for example, Google controls more than 90%, my colleagues, of the online search market, and Apple and Google operating as twin monopolies in app distribution through their app stores, using their market power to charge up to a 30% tax, something that Senator Blackburn and Blumenthal and I have been working on competing app developers that have to use the app store to reach their users. We have to look at this differently than just startup companies in a garage. That's not what they are anymore. They may have started small, but now they are dominant platforms. These are some of the most successful companies in the world. As I mentioned, we are proud of their success. We all know here that they have a bunch of money, and that's fine. That's capitalism. But in America, we never rest on success. And one of the ways we do this is by figuring out what is working, what isn't working, how we fix it, so we rejuvenate our capitalist markets. To quote Adam Smith, the so-called godfather of capitalism, the invisible hand of competitive entrepreneurship is the key to a strong capitalist economy. I think a lot of people would agree with this in this room. But he added, and this isn't as well known, only if we have a government that effectively takes on what he called the overgrown standing army of monopolists. What laws, we'll start with this, has the Senate passed to curb monopoly power in this area? Not one. We haven't meaningfully updated our antitrust laws since the birth of the internet. In fact, despite broad bipartisan support, standing with Americans on issues like privacy and rules of the road for tech, we haven't passed anything. Part of this, we know, is the power out there. And I truly appreciate those senators that are co-sponsors, those that have kept an open mind, those that have had questions about this, because you're doing your jobs. Because what we're dealing with right now is that in 2021, Amazon and Facebook were both in the top 3 of federal lobbying expenditures in the nation. In 2020, they each spent more than any other company in America. They're running ads, they're doing everything. That actually is somewhat predictable. But what has been really heartening for me is that maybe what wasn't predictable to them is that their senators in this body are willing to say, you know what? We want these companies to be successful, like Senator Grassley, I know, believes, but at some point we have to have some rules of the road to make things fair. Going back to last Congress, we have held hearings, as Senator Grassley explained, in the Competition Policy Subcommittee, which I'm proud to chair with Senator Lee, on anti-competitive conduct by digital monopolies, and the testimony has been troubling. Time and time again, we heard about how these companies abuse their power as monopolies. And who is paying the price? Everyone else, from small businesses to sometimes mid-size and big businesses to consumers. Here are a few examples. In a November full Judiciary Committee chaired by Senator Durbin, the founder of a small business that sells on Amazon told us that Amazon knocked off his product after he spent years refining his ideas and securing patents. Another example, the Wall Street Journal reported that an Amazon employee working on new products accessed data on a car trunk organizer manufactured by a third-party seller called Fortum, a four-person Brooklyn-based company run by 2 29-year-olds. Soon after, Amazon launched 3 trunk organizers similar to Fortum's under its Amazon Basics private label brand. There is no way that people on this committee can think that's okay. Last April in the subcommittee, we heard from Tile, a bigger company, about how they had a good relationship with Apple until Apple decided to create a competing product and then refused to give Tile access to a chip that would allow it to compete with Apple's product on equal terms. Tile told this committee that they believe only legislation would get Apple to stop this anti-competitive behavior. In June, we heard from Sonos, an innovative home speaker company, about how dominant players like Google and Amazon, all of which have competing devices, make interoperating with their platforms, quote, difficult if not impossible. Sonos told us that we're currently on the path towards a few dominant companies controlling all of the home device ecosystem. In our December subcommittee hearing on innovation, at which we discussed this bill in particular, we heard from the founder of messaging startup Beeper about how big tech companies like Facebook have boxed out competitors' messaging services and preferenced their own products. I know that almost everyone in this room have heard from the gatekeeper platform companies. They don't like our bill. You can see the ads on TV. But for the first time, the monopoly power is going to be challenged in what I consider to be a smart way. They are going to suggest amendment after amendment, by the way, my friends, change after change, and they're never going to like this bill. As you all know from the testimony of the Facebook whistleblower over in the Commerce Committee, which Senator Blumenthal and Blackburn did such an excellent job working on together, from Spotify, who came before this committee, and Match.com, when people take them on or companies take them on, they have for decades formed an impenetrable shield. They're making a lot of money. They want to maintain and profit and keep their positions as monopoly gatekeepers. Despite the flood of misinformation and outright lies about this bill from these companies, I appreciate my co-sponsor, Senator Grassley's irascible ability to continue to support this common sense support and take on this misinformation. And in fact, the results are clear. Let me read you the headline from a Washington Post editorial about this legislation. After we made changes to the House version of the bill, they said this in the headline: finally, a promising piece of tech antitrust legislation in Congress. The Boston Globe published an op-ed titled, "A Chance for Congress to Turn Concern Over Big Tech Sway into Action." This is about creating rules of the road. It's about not letting these monopolies unfairly put their products first over the products of competitors just because of their market dominance. It's about not letting them use private third-party information that they only have because of their monopoly power to copy smaller competitors' products. This isn't fair. It isn't reasonable. And let's be clear, these are not new concerns. We have been hearing about this anti-competitive self-preferencing by dominant digital platforms for more than a decade. There are hearings long before I ever chaired this subcommittee. The European Commission started an investigation into Google's favoring its own shopping product in its search results more than 10 years ago. In 2012, the Federal Trade Commission also investigated Google for favoring its own products in search. And we know that during the Trump administration, cases were brought against these platforms in both the Justice Department and the FTC, and those cases have been continued by the Biden administration, Justice Department, and FTC. As I've mentioned, we've heard that Amazon unfairly favors its own products, and then it uses vendors' non-public data to develop products to compete against them. We've heard about Facebook crippling the functionality of competing products like Vine, which ultimately puts them out of business. We know that Google puts its own restaurant reviews and travel services first in search results, driving businesses to itself through its market power in search. All of this and more was painstakingly documented in a lengthy report issued following a 16-month bipartisan investigation in the House Judiciary Committee on the state of competition in digital markets. I know that people on our side of the aisle have talked to Representative Cicilline about this, and people on the other side of the aisle have talked to Representative Buck. They worked together on this from beginning to end. That investigation was a serious and comprehensive one, including multiple hearings, numerous witness interviews, and an extensive review of millions of documents. These are all practices that distort competition, limit the ability of small businesses to compete, stifle innovation, and most importantly, harm consumers. Before introducing this bill in the Senate, I worked with Senator Grassley to make a number of changes to the House version to ensure that not only will the bill protect consumers and give small and medium-sized businesses a shot at competing, but that the platforms covered under the bill can still continue to innovate and compete. Senator Grassley and I have also been soliciting and receiving feedback on the legislation over the last several months from businesses, consumer groups, the platforms themselves, and from many of you. And we have used that feedback to create the manager's amendment that we're offering today. That manager's amendment makes further updates to the bill that will provide privacy and security, including provisions to clarify, and this is key with some of the concerns many of you have raised, to clarify that certain types of privacy-enhancing conduct would, of course, be allowed and permitted. The manager's amendment also included changes to ensure that powerful platforms won't escape the bill's coverage merely because they are not publicly traded, to make clear that subscription services like Amazon Prime are not impacted by the bill. This was a claim that Senator Grassley and I think, soundly defeated in the original bill, but just to make it clear for people, we included this provision. To mandate that the federal enforcers issue robust agency enforcement guidelines within 9 months of enactment to provide clarity to the business community, a request from several members. To provide a 1-year period for covered platforms to come into compliance, again, a request from several members and the platforms. To clarify that covered platforms may still use the subscription models, which I mentioned, and other common sense revisions. The bill strikes the right balance between preventing the conduct that hurts competition while also ensuring that platforms can continue to provide privacy and data security features to their users, compete against rivals in the United States and abroad, and maintain services that benefit consumers. We have a lot of support for this bill. We don't have the money to run TV ads in favor of it like those that oppose it, but we have a lot of support. Most of the small business and consumer groups, again, don't have the funds to do that or hire big lobbyists, but nevertheless, they are strongly with us. We all have an interest in promoting a strong, competitive, innovative digital economy in this country. This bill is a balanced, bipartisan proposal to help achieve this goal. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation as revised under the Manager's Amendment and voted out of this committee. January 1st, 1983 is considered the official birthday of the Internet. Now, nearly 40 years later, we are still here without a single piece of meaningful competition legislation addressing the massive economy that it has created. And if the tech companies and their armies of lobbyists, 2,500 at last count, are hoping that they can stop us from getting a vote, bring it on. This is our moment. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar, Senator Grassley indicates to me that he stands by his opening statement, and traditionally we begin by adopting a manager's amendment and then see if there are any other amendments to be offered. Do you want to offer the manager's amendment?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like